Yes. Yeah, hello everyone. So let's start it to the summer school journal club. Maybe this is the first time, no, second time in this year. So let's introduce yourselves shortly and soon let's start it. Uh, yeah, start with me. Hello, my name is Kyoko Kusano. I'm a PhD candidate student in Nao's lab. Uh, my major was neuroscience. Nice to meet you. Mike, can you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. Me?
Yes.
Yes. I'm Mike. I'm a second year PhD student from NAUS Lab. My focus is currently on quantum cognition. I'm still trying to figure out what that means, but yeah, we'll see.
Nice. So who's next? Yana, can you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Yana. I am also a second year PhD student here in Canada and UBCO. I'm studying metaphor production, but I'm also like I do some research in quantum cognition and also trying to figure out what the hell that means. So very much on the same board here.
Nice to meet you. Aurora, can you introduce yourself? Oh, your mic is not working again.
Can you hear me? Can you hear
Yeah, partly, yes.
me? All right, I'm doing my master's in
Your mic,
um,
your audio is contains so much noises, so maybe you can turn off your video, make your connection stable.
can you hear
Yes, yes.
me now? Okay. Well, the thing is, I'm traveling at the moment, and I'm using my hotspot, and I'm in the high mountain. I'm not sure about the connection yet. Sorry.
It's okay.
Um, I'm doing my master's in computational science in Berlin at the moment, and I started my master's.
Hey, nice to meet you. And Matteo. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Matteo Grasso. I have a background in philosophy, but after my PhD in philosophy, I joined the IIT lab in Madison to work on IIT, and I've been there for the past 7, 8 years now, mostly working on IIT applied to contents of experience like different qualia.
Great, thank you. So thankfully, we have an author of the second paper today, so we can we can get a very good discussion, I think. Okay,
That's not condescending at all.
yeah, right. Okay, then let's start it. So which one want to do the first?
I'm happy to do the first. Would it be all right if I share my slide real quick? It's
Yeah.
really short.
So yes,
Okay.
the presentation time is limited to 15 minutes.
No.
And this
Well,
after that, we have a discussion time for 15 minutes. So I will notice you if you exceeded 15 minutes. Okay.
yep. No worries. So I will be talking about the enriched category paper. So what is enriched category and why do we care about it? Well, first, just to introduce some of the background, why we are interested in enriched category in the first place. So in our lab, we are very interested in study the structure between qualias. So in this case, specifically color experiences, right? So what we normally do with participants is we don't invite, but we send out essentially online questionnaires and we ask participants to rate similarity or dissimilarity between a pair of colors. So in this case, the red color comparing to the red color is going to be zero dissimilarity because they are the exact same shade of red. The red and orange, they're a little bit dissimilar, but they are not that much different. So we can create this matrix based on the similarity rating or dissimilarity rating from the participants, we can visualize it in a two-dimensional space. And that's really good. It allows us to understand the structure of these color experiences. Now, with the introduction of category theory, it allows us to use a lot more interesting mathematical tools to describe these relationships, but it also presents certain challenges, especially the bare bone original ordinary version of the category theory. So what are some of these issues? So in category theories, we would consider these color experiences as individual objects inside a big Qualia category. And some of these objects have an arrow between them representing some kind of relationship. Let's say in this case, it's sort of an almost equal relationship between two colors. So participants who look at the red and a different shade of red may say, they're almost equal to each other in terms of visual experience. But they may say that the red and the green, they are completely different. There's no arrow between them. So that would be a simplest version of Qualia category inside category series. But as you can probably tell, it's kind of tough to replicate the more complex dissimilarity relationship we introduced before just by using almost equal relationship between different objects. Very difficult to reconstruct that. So what do we need to do is to enrich the category. What does that mean exactly? So in the bare bone ordinary version of category theory, let's say if there are two objects and there are a bunch of relationship between them as represented by the arrows, we can look at them and say, that's a set of relationships. And that's about it. But what we can do is instead consider that this set of relationships actually have some kind of relationships between them, a structure of its own. And in this case, we would like to describe them rather than a set as a dissimilarity category and each arrow as an object of this category. Now, the author stressed quite a bit about these arrows being monoid. I don't entirely understand the importance of that, but it seems just to allow this set of relationship to be considered as a category because it allows them to, composite the relationships. But we can probably talk about that later because I don't fully understand it either. But talking about dissimilarity category, well, what does it look like? Well, this is perhaps what it may look like. So we mentioned before, participants can rate pairwise similarity or dissimilarity using numbers, let's say from 0 to 7. Then we would look at it and we would think, perhaps there are 8 objects, each corresponding to array numbers from 0 to 7, right? 8 objects. And we know that if participant is rating something to be 7, they are saying that the two colors are highly dissimilar comparing to, all the other ratings. And if the participant says 0, then the two colors is probably very similar. There will be a low level of dissimilarity comparing to other ratings. So we know that we probably, in the simplest of terms, can describe the relationship between these objects, these numbers, as smaller or equal to. So 0 is smaller or equal to 7. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because 7 is the largest level of dissimilarity that the participant can rate. So we now have a dissimilarity category. We have a Qualia category. Now we just need to combine them, we push them together. We enrich the Qualia category with the dissimilarity category. How do we do it? It looks something like this. The D represents dissimilarity, and we see that it's always pairwise, right? A two-color dissimilarity. In this case, it's 0 because, well, they are the exact same shade of red. Once again, in orange and red, there's some dissimilarity, but not a lot. and then more and more dissimilarity until green, so on and so forth. But as mentioned before, there's also the, smaller or equal to sign between these numbers. So we compare the vertical column with the horizontal rows. We can look at, for example, we'll start with red and red. It's equal to 0. It is smaller or equal to itself. It's a white square. Smaller or equal to 1, because orange, red, 1. And smaller or equal to essentially everything else, because it's the smallest rating. That's good. It's all white on the first row. Second row, we see that it's equal to 1. It is smaller or equal to almost everything else, except the dissimilarity between red and red, which is 0. And then we construct this matrix-like thingy based on these rules that we have established, smaller or equal to, and separate them into white square and black square. And we get something that's kind of similar to the color matrix, the dissimilarity matrix we have seen before. There are some major differences. For example, the color matrix is asymmetrical. This one is not. But we have made an attempt to capture the more complex dissimilarity relationship between colors rather than simply pointing at two and saying, are they almost equal to each other? And they also mentioned the possibility of bringing this into a generalized metric space. I'm not sure how they do it, but apparently they can. And inside this generalized matrix space, it doesn't even have to be Euclidean. So it doesn't have to follow some of the rules that the diagram B has to follow, where, for example, it has to be symmetrical in terms of distances from one point to another, and that point from point red to point purple, and from purple to point red. Doesn't have to be true in the generalized metric space, which is good because it may not necessarily be true in real color similarities. So that's it. That's the enriched category and how it's used, how it may be used in describing color dissimilarity.
Thank you for a very fantastic presentation. Did you make it for only within 2 hours?
The PowerPoint is made within half an hour.
Oh.
The reading may have taken a bit longer than 2 hours, alas.
Maybe now didn't phrase for it, but yeah, it was really interesting and great presentation. Thank you so much. And do you have anything you couldn't understand well? And
I think it's mainly so they talk a lot about monoids and they use a lot of example
yeah,
saying, oh, this is what monoid you can think of monoid in this way, but I'm not sure why are they putting so much efforts in explaining it. Is it just to satisfy the composition rules, or are there something I'm missing here? But that's one thing I'm not sure about. The other thing is this generalized metric space. I don't quite get how it works. That's another aspect. And the last one is that how does the two category combine with each other? Is it just through participants' actual empirical rating? Is that how these dissimilarity get their numbers? I think that's the case, but I'm not sure.
Nice. So others, do you have any points you couldn't understand clearly? I suppose most of points are not clear because this paper is really heavy. And yeah, I couldn't understand why they treat the monoid so importantly. And actually, my understanding of monoid and the monoidal category and monoidal function looks like a little different. So I'm a little bit confusing. So yeah, others, do you have any comments or questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated also the importance and the stress on the Yoneda lemma. And I think this is another key aspect that the category theory is very important, because it's basically trying also to tell us how can we infer that two experiences are the same experience. Well, basically we say if they relate in the same way to everything else, right, then we have almost no reason to think that they will be different experiences. And so I was wondering what in this case, what was the insistence on the Yoneda lemma, if there's anything that you found around that. And also I was wondering, in this specific example that you're showing, you can, if you consider the orange and the blue, the orange and the purple row and the yellow and the blue row, like they look the same, right? They look like orange is only, so you have, in principle, these two rows are identical. Does it mean that in this sense, the difference between the two in their relations to everything else is not captured? And so, yeah, the Yoneda lemma will tell us that these are the same experience, so to speak.
Mike, do you have any comments on that? Or
I think the straightforward comment would be that it only captures the relationship between red and another color. So there's a much bigger matrix that we are not seeing, but we are seeing a small example of it. And based on this limited, restricted space, we see that orange and purple are indeed exactly similar. But I imagine if we see the whole picture, it will be different.
I see. So by adding relations between red and other things and orange and blue with other things, then eventually we will find that actually they relate differently. I see. Thanks.
yeah. I thought this matrix is showing such kind of the arrows, the morphism between the objects. So yeah, I don't think this is one Qualia category, Qualia enriched category itself. So is it correct that this matrix is showing that the morphism? Actually, I don't understand or figure out the clear image that one category become the morphism.
Can you rephrase the question?
I couldn't understand that how it will be like that so there is a two objects, and then in a normal category there is arrows between them, and this is showed as a set, simple set. So this is a normal category, and in enriched category, this set becomes a category. So this is a this generalized matrix, space matrix. I understood in that like this way. Is it correct that?
I think so, but I'm not good enough with category theory to really give a definitive answer.
Yeah, yeah. So category itself has, of course, object and arrows. So distance arc. So this kind of D category D also has an arrow within it, but these arrows are treated in how I don't understand that way. Yeah,
Actually, I think that the matrix just shows you like how so the question is, are there arrow between two objects? In this case, there seems to be arrow between the first row, there will be arrow between all of them. The second row, there will be arrow between almost all of them except the first column. I think that's my impression of how
maybe I could understood. Okay, Iana, do you have any question?
Yeah, it's about something you touched on before. So I was like wondering, when do we know that we fully got every single like set, I guess is the right word? Because if we take colors, we can infinitely divide them by tones and pantones and stuff like that. And ultimately, I think the goal of this work is to like examine at least like more complex qualia, like maybe feelings, emotions, stuff like that, hopefully we reach that someday. So how do we know that we reached the end of the space, kind of?
That's actually a great question because I think the answer is we don't. Because especially actually this related to a different discussion I had with some other people before. So there's recently a paper about discovering a new color. Has everybody seen it? They directly stimulate the M cone with a laser to create a green nobody has seen before. I don't know how they do it. Well, I have some idea how they did it, but yeah. So one of the questions raised is that if we can just bring in new colors that no one have ever seen before, how do we know we have exhausted the entire experience space to create a relationship structure? And maybe one of the idea is that we don't have to exhaust everything. Just based on what we can experience normally, we can already understand a lot about the structure between qualia. And maybe that's enough. That's the hope, but we are not entirely sure.
Yeah, because I had the thought of like, I remember the failures of structuralism back then, the fact that we cannot really count every single experience. And I think that touches upon like the paper that I read about causation and how like this is prediction right now, kind of, because of the like you can predict from red and orange and red and purple that like they're both going to be connected with red and red, but that's not caused by it. Like the relationships are different between those supposedly. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. I think maybe Matteo would have some idea, hopefully.
Well, I can maybe just one comment is that I think there's many reasons why it would be hard to compile an exhaustive list, and even before getting to the possibility of evaluating all possible relations is also that introspection is limited, and in some of our papers from space paper to the structure paper that is available also in the Google folder, there is some ideas that introspection could be limited, and therefore there are some contexts of experience that we can describe, but then not really inspect in detail. But we can talk about it. So, I mean, if for one person we were able to really make an exhaustive list of what they think they feel, then that would be as close as we can get to something that, is it's just a list of feelings. And then if we can compare it or not, that's separate question. But yeah, so anyway, there's lots to say about this, of course.
Okay. Overall, do you have anything?
Yeah, my question is about the dissimilarity. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's about the dissimilarity. I'm not sure how, because this seems to be like the starting point of the whole thing. And I'm not sure how, it looks like they did experiment and just asked the participant um, to give a number of this, but I wonder if the D between red and orange would be the same as D orange and red. It depends on, does it, like if somebody's shown red first or somebody's shown orange first, then they would get a different number. Or I don't know. It seems very subjective thing. And is the participant all like healthy patient, or like what's their mental state, or how's their mood, or are they colorblind? Everything it seems to be very unclear.
Okay.
Yes. So on the more experimental side, I'm reasonably confident that we carry out some filtering in the process. So we ask the platform that we use to collect data to only select participants who are not colorblind. And we can carry out some measurements inside the task as well to ensure that we know to some extent whether the participant have normal vision or not. Regarding the asymmetry, you are completely right. It is subjective. And in some cases, we suspect we may be reliably detecting asymmetry between color pairs. So in this case, as you mentioned, orange and red similarity or dissimilarity may be different from red and orange. But I think perhaps one of the benefit of category theory, as far as I can understand it, is that such asymmetry is actually perfectly acceptable. And that may be a good thing for us to actually accurately describe this. But yeah, I agree with you. There are a lot of factors that we may need to control or at least constrain to make sure we get reliable results.
Just for a small comment, and maybe it's not clear, so we can create a dissimilarity matrix for each participant. So each participant has different dissimilarity matrix based on their answer. So as you said, we ask participant to how dissimilar these two colors, and they answered it's 3 or 4 or 0 or something. And this number will be translated into some kind of distance, and this similarity matrix was created. So yeah, this similarity matrix is differs among participants. Now, your question is clear, Aurora? Okay, great. Okay, do you have anything else? And one comment, Matteo, about Yoneda lemma. I'm not so expert on Yoneda lemma and category theory, but these days I found something understandable why they are so, I don't know, they treat so Yoneda lemma very importantly. So I have some explanation. But this will be very big discussion, so I will send you a message later.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure at school we will talk about the Yoneda lemma a lot because it's
yeah,
very
must be.
so.
So maybe we don't have to in prior. Okay. Do you have anything else?
Just one last little comment, just because Mike also mentioned quantum cognition. It was mentioned in the paper about Aurora's comment on red and orange versus orange and red. This would be interesting to see in the order effect context. I don't know, maybe something to look into.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, then let's start the second session. Yeah, can you share your screen?
Yes. Let me just find where my presentation is. For some reason, I don't see my presentation in the share screen. Let me just double check. Oh, there it is.
Oh,
okay.
beautiful slide.
Thank you. All right, so I decided to present this paper, Causal Reductionism, Causal Structures, by Matteo et al. The main rationale for this paper is that causal reductionism conflates causation with predictions, which I'm gonna kind of deconstruct that. So causal reductionism means that when we are thinking of a system with cause and effects, causal reductionism kind of thinks of it as if we kind of determine the most small elements of the system, then if we see the causes for each element's activation or effects or something, then we can kind of from that interpret all of the system's mechanisms without taking into account higher order connections between those elements. And the reason why it's doing that is because causation, in the paper, it's argumented that causation is confused there with prediction, because prediction relies on like kind of looking at smaller elements and kind of predicting how the system will operate. But in causation, we actually have to look at causes and effects of things. And sometimes when we look at neural networks or consciousness, we see emergence. So we see something that is bigger than the sum of its parts, which is reliant on more than one small element, but the combination of elements working together. And there's also this notion of supervenience, which is also sometimes used to kind of excuse causal reductionism, which I have heard of it before, but I'm still kind of like, it's hard for me to grasp it sometimes. But basically, if smaller elements of the system are fixed in one state, then it seems that by supervenience logic, the larger elements, like the combination of elements in the system, are also going to be fixed in a certain way. So they're going to be kind of supervenient on the state of the smaller elements, which maybe Matteo can clear up if I'm right in that description or not. But basically, that's the reason why causal reductionism kind of fails sometimes to successfully explain how system works. And this example that is shown in this article is three types of frogs that are called F3, F2, and F1, and three types of bugs. So left bug, right bug, and superbug. And left bug and right bug are preys to these F frogs, and superbug is a predator, so it's a combination of right and left bug. And left and right basically means that a frog has to leap a certain direction to catch it, and the superbug has to be jumped over to avoid it. So this is the kind of picture that shows the logic of their movement and such, but it's very simple, kind of straightforward, I think, elements of like smaller systems. And then we kind of see that F3, F2, and F1 are quite different in their internal organization. So F3 frog has three sensors, three central units, and two motors. And so to catch bugs, it has the sensors that kind of detect the left or right bugs. It activates central units, so like nervous system basically. And the motor, like the corresponding motor, suggests it to move either right or left. And when we come to the superbug, what helps it to detect and jump over it is the presence of the central unit CC, which is activated by the sensors kind of firing together. But like it can also be activated by them separately, so that's fine as well. And then both motors activate and we jump over. So in this situation, it seems that causal reductionism works, because if we sever any of those kind of connections, it's going to happen all the same. And then in F2 frog, they're kind of evolved a bit differently. They have no CC sensor, so they are finding or like detecting the superbug by CL and CR activating at the same time. So that's a higher order kind of system. And so that cannot be reduced to like just basic elements. So if we kind of take out different elements of the system, it's not going to work anymore. And so that's why the kind of explanation that the cause of the jumping over the bug is going to be just simple elements, like the basic elements of the system, and not combination of those two elements of CL and CR, is not going to be enough to explain how the system works. And then we have F1 frogs to drive it even further. They are simpler, much simpler than the two previous versions. They're just one-sided, so they have either left or right type. And they basically are constructed similarly to F2 frog if we are kind of smooshed together, but they're not actually. And so they show that if you kind of sever this system, it's not going to work apart from each other. It's only going to work if you have it combined together. And so that shows that, if they are two frogs are together, they're going to jump over, they're going to detect the superbug. If they're not together, they don't have any capability to detect the superbug and avoid the death. And so this kind of goes in further to explain how this is kind of rainy, but kind of how we can go on and analyze our, for example, neural network kind of activation patterns and like causal structures in there. And if we analyze it by coarse and fine grain, so coarse would be higher order kind of bigger systems, and fine are just basic elements, roughly. And if we go through the causal system analysis by spatial grain, so how many neurons there are in the system, or like brain areas, temporal grain, so how many like time units we have, and state grain, which is I am kind of confused on what that means, so I'm not going to explain it. So if we actually calculate alpha, which is the level to which kind of all of the systems model explains the cause and effect of everything, the coarse grain level explains it much better than the fine grain. So it's much better to look at bigger picture of the whole system than to look at smaller elements of the system to actually see what is cause and effect in the system. Yeah. And so the difficulties I had, I just went with like the structure that was kind of proposed. So the difficulties I had with is like I didn't know some of the terminology. So like perturbation, partition, I kind of guessed what they mean, but I wasn't sure sometimes. I had a hard time following causal analysis logic in box 3 and somewhat figure 3. I am like I have a hard time following that. And then I tried to look at the supplements, but probability, unfortunately, is not my strong suit. So that is where I was kind of suffering. And the question I had was, how is causal analysis performed in simpler terms? So that's kind of great that we have Matteo to describe that. What does causal strength rely on in that like analysis? What is a straight grain? Which, yeah. And yeah, those are the simpler questions. And then I had kind of higher order questions of, do we assume the same logic for consciousness? Like, do we think that it's better to kind of get bigger elements of like try to figure out what are the bigger structures in consciousness, kind of combinations of qualia together. And one like from quantum side of like, this is applicable to Bayesian logic. How do we deal with problems like rationality, for example, where there's a lot of exceptions, and Bayesian logic sometimes kind of seems to fail. So that's it, I think. Yeah.
Thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I can just leave them on screen so that we have the question.
then yeah, it's better to have Matteo's comment first, I think.
Well, in the spirit of the journal club, where we have to get out of our comfort zone, if that's okay, I would propose other participants maybe to talk first. If there is anything you think you know the answer, or you want to chime in on any of these questions, please go ahead. I want to speak last, or as little as possible.
Okay, that's rational, I think. Okay, yeah, I didn't understood is how the alpha was calculated in which way, because there is some result of the alpha is bigger than 0 or not, but I couldn't find any space how to calculate it. And also, yeah, and I wanted to know how costly this calculation is, because we have to calculate with every partial graphs on the time scale and micro and macro scale. So the calculation would be very expensive, I expect. And if we have the multiple level of the cause, which cause is the most effective, we decide,
Sorry.
is my questions. Okay, others, do you have anything? Mike, please.
Oh, yes. I have like one question regarding the F2 frog. So one of the main arguments the paper seems to present is that F3 frog and F2 frog, if you look at them based on the circumstances, they are quite similar. When superbugs come in, they both jump over it. F1 frog and the other two frog are very different because F1 frog completely unable to detect superbug. But what if a causal reductionist come in and he look at the F2 frog and he says, well, from my perspective, I really don't think superbug have any causal power in the system. Is that an incoherent position to take necessarily? Or is it merely like a stupid position to take? Like in the sense that it lacks explanatory power. So what's the issue with the argument that F2 frog superbug has no causal power in F2 frog?
So
Does that make sense?
yeah, I think I can try to explain, but also it might be kind of wonky. So it seems like what we're looking at is like from causal reductionism perspective, they are indeed like similar on the outside. The inside mechanism is different, right? So, and what we ideally want to learn is not only how to predict behavior, but how to explain the causes of the behavior. And again, we can like predict it very clearly whether we are causal reductionists or not. But it seems like if we look at if you look at it as a metaphor for a human in like doing things in the world, and we have like a much higher complexity of the system, how much of that causal explanation is going to add to our understanding of the reasons why like consciousness works a certain way, for example, is the question there. So I think seemingly from the analysis, like from this, quite a lot, because it seems like the explanation power of like looking into higher order kind of relationships and fuller picture of the causation seems to be more like giving us more explanation on why things are the way that they are. But I mean, if straightforward causal reductionist, you can also say that it doesn't matter, I guess, but we're scientists, so I guess it matters for us, at least. That's my attempt.
Thank you. I think that did clarify some of the points. Yes.
Can I add one question to that? So understood that F2 frog, they don't have any neurons like CC to find the superbugs. So in the causal reductionism point, F2 frog is not different with F1 frog, I thought. Is it correct?
It's correct if they are smooshed together, like if there's two F1 frogs. So only one F1 frog would be either left or right. So it would be like one side of F2 frog.
Yes. So the point is, in the reductionism view, if two F1 frogs and F2 frog is the same, but in the function, we see the function F3 frog and F2 frog is the same. But F3 frog is completely different between F1 frogs because they have CC neurons. But even if the frog doesn't have CC neurons, the behavior is the same. We can't distinguish that behavior using the causal reductionism. My understanding is like that, but is it the same as you, Iana?
Yeah, I think so. So I guess what this shows is just that from the more casual analysis of it all, they're all similar, like in terms of like if we just forget that there are two F1 frogs. But from the inside, they're quite different. So that's why there is an argument for, opting into more casual analysis and not causal analysis, not causal reductionism.
Okay.
Right. So maybe I can add just one thing. I think everything you said is correct. And maybe so one way, just as a take-home message, I guess, is the example was built on attention, like to try and highlight attention between two, let's say, extreme positions. One is reductionism that basically tells you, like Mike was saying, F1 frogs clearly detect superbugs because it has a superbug detector. It's a first order mechanism that is dedicated to superbugs, right? It just does that. F2 frogs, well, they behave like they see superbugs, but really what's happening is that it's just two left bug and right bug detectors activating together, and then they avoid the superbug. But it's almost like you could say it's supervenient, it's epiphenomenal. Actually, everything that is going on is that the frog sees a left bug and right bug at the same time and thinks, jump. But there is no superbug really. So that's one way. If you are a reductionist, it seems a little strange that you have super bugs and you think that F1 frogs see them and F2 frogs don't. And especially if you also consider F1 frogs, you will end up thinking that there is no difference between F2 frogs and F1 frogs because neither of them has a superbug detector. So intuitively, you are capturing the fact that there is a superbug detector in the F1 frog, but you miss the difference between the F2 and the F1 frogs. You're basically something that is clearly trivially obvious. F2 frogs actually, they detect superbugs as much as F3 frogs, right? So if you go all the way to the other side and like maybe, Kyoko, you were saying, if you say, well, but all frogs actually ultimately escape from superbugs, so all that matters is behavior. You can be a holist, or you can be a behaviorist, or you can be a functionalist. You can say, well, all that matters is that the frog jumps. And if you adopt this position, though, you don't see the difference between F2 and F1 frogs again, and you don't realize that F2 frogs have a system in place for the two elements to fire to avoid superbugs, whereas like F1 frogs don't even exist as one system. They just happen to be next to each other. And so you again miss the fact that there is a big difference here. The only consistent option to see the difference between the three systems, meaning knowing that both F3 and F2 frogs detect superbugs and F1 frogs don't, and yet F2 and F3 are different, is that you can appeal to higher order mechanisms to explain why F2 frogs, even though they don't have a superbug detector, there's a first order mechanism, they still react to superbugs in a way that is different from F1 frogs. So it's this idea that with these three cases, if you accept reductionism, then you miss, you are in one corner, you have one undesirable consequence. If you are a holist and you just accept the behavior of the frog, then you end up attributing functions where they don't belong to things that are not even systems, unified systems. And so it's very hard to find a third way that strikes the balance and captures the fact that F2 frogs detect superbugs, but doesn't apply to F1 frogs. So that was the attempt of the paper. If there is one way, I guess, to summarize it, I think it would be this one. I hope this clarifies something.
Yeah, that was very helpful.
Thank you so much.
Another thing that it has been mentioned many times, I think, what is causal analysis, how it is performed, and what's the role of alpha. How does it relate to consciousness? One comment is that, so the paper builds on the previous formalism for actual causation that Larissa and Giulio developed in previous papers with animates. So I just applied that formalism. But in general, the idea of actual causation is basically to take the same formalism of IIT, basically computing integrated information, but just relax it a little bit, because basically we are not talking about intrinsic causation. We are not talking about a system causing itself, but we're talking about things causing each other extrinsically, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So the formulas of actual causation alpha and integrated information phi are actually very similar. You are just relaxing this intrinsicality or existence, intrinsic existence principle or postulate, axiom and postulate. And so if you want to look into the formalism, you will see the analogy between alpha and phi.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, and alpha is there is still the maximality principle of exclusion. So for the state grain, you can ask the question, what caused what at which grain? So you can ask whether it is at the temporal scale and spatial scale of molecules or neurons or areas, etc. And then where you find the maximal strength of alpha, that tells you this is really where the causal power, in this case, sense extrinsic, lies.
So you relax the intrinsic cause-effect structure into the between amongst structures. Then do you think can you relax more because there is a postulate or axiom that this cause-effect structure is limited to which have the physical networks. But if you think about the more phenomenal, there is no physical connections between them, but there is some cause-effect things we feel. Can you apply this discussion to these kind of things?
I'm not sure. Maybe I don't understand the question. So because I guess in physical terms, the formalism applies to conditional probabilities, right? So it has to be something that must be described as a change, as a different that makes a difference. This is the usual terminology that we use when we talk about cause-effect power. So anything that you can model as transition probability matrices and conditional probabilities, you can apply one or more of these basically postulates, and you can relax them or make them stronger. That definitely consciousness, actually, the idea of IIT is that is captured by applying these postulates in the strictest possible way, so applying all of them. but yeah, you can relax and study other phenomena, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought this discussion is very broad and very abstract. So I thought this can be applied to not only the physical networks, but also more abstract thing. Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah.
Aurora, do you have anything? I'm sorry.
I want to make a comment that I find it. Oh my God, dog! Sorry. I'm living in this dog hotel. Sorry. And make a comment that I find it quite impossible to finish reading and understand the papers in 2 hours.
It's okay.
Am I alone? Am not alone in this? I mean, this is so rich, this paper, but I find it really interesting because I feel like it's a little bit similar to like Gödel's theorem and trying to prove with a something quite fundamental about a system with a game. And I didn't know that there was a paper before this, but I wanted to ask the author like how did this come about and what's difficulty to do something like this?
Sorry, if what do you say the last thing?
What's the difficulty to do something? And yes, how did you come up with this whole thing? Because it's like I just only read this paper, but obviously there should be so much more before this. And yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I agree. I apologize. The paper is a little heavy, and we actually tried on purpose to keep it as short as possible, and we managed to get to 7 pages. It was like as short as possible. I wanted it to be 3 pages because, in a sense, the example is simple, and you can describe it simply, and the mathematical formalism is not. It's just a simple point in principle. Well, so the formalism that brought here is the one of actual causation, the animate story that you can check the internal mechanisms of a system and check whether it's caused from within or from the outside and apply this formalism to realize what caused what is really the conceptual background. Another thing that I want to mention is that, so to go even one step lower in simplifying things, I think that the question that we wanted to really ask is, like Yana said, the difference between prediction and causation. So this is an example where we took biological functions and we asked the question, well, if you are a reductionist and you think that really just individual neurons exist, or in the limit individual atoms, and all that matters is what they do, their state, then clearly you just don't think that there's anything along the lines of biological properties. There's no such thing as macro properties that exist at higher levels, let alone consciousness, which is of course even above the biological. So we wanted to present a sort of absurd reductio of reductionism, using biological properties as an example, because scientists like to talk about biological properties. They are like, of course they exist, of course systems and organisms perform biological functions. But the point is exactly that the fact that you can predict everything in a reductionist framework doesn't mean that you have explained everything. You may still leave causation out, like Yana pointed out very explicitly. You can think about, let's say I have a system of traffic lights that turn on and off, synchronized, when one is red, the other one is green, etc. Of course, I can predict what the system is going to do, right? But I don't know what caused them to turn on and off. They might actually be connected through wires. There might be a centralized controller. They might just be synchronized, so there is no causation going on at all. And if I shut one off, the other ones keep doing their thing. So the difference between causation and prediction is crucial. Prediction, we're so good at predicting first level behavior of the part that we think that that's all we need, but actually causation is complex. And if we also want to get to biological properties and consciousness, we have to realize that higher levels of mechanisms, higher orders, are as existing and causing as much as the first order ones. So yeah, that's all I can say. I hope it helps.
And thank you so much. Okay. So anything else? Do you have any comments or something? Okay.
So what is the state grade?
Oh.
So that I don't question
No.
myself.
This is a very good point. And so in the, I would encourage also, if you want to look up in the IIT wiki, there's probably in the glossary, you can find the, you can search for grain and state grain. And I can actually, it's grain. I can post it in the chat. So basically the idea is that, so let's say you can think about the difference between a logic gate that is just like binary, has on and on state. And that would be state grain is just two, like it just has two states on and on. But if you have instead a neuron, you can think about the neuron as firing or not firing, which is on and off. But you can also separate your state grain, let's say in 4, because you can say my neuron is not firing at all. It's just a baseline. It is firing, let's say, just a little bit. Like, let's say you can think about it in hertz. You can say like 1 hertz, and then it can be 4 hertz, and then it can be bursting, and I don't know, much more. So you can actually have 4 different states for a single unit. The state grain is the one that tells you which threshold of, let's say, firing for a neuron is actually relevant. Do I care about the difference between 1 and 1.1 hertz? Probably not, but between 0, 1 hertz and bursting, there is a big difference, right? So I might want to analyze my properties at different state grains and basically sample or parcel my signal in 4 or only in 2, and I might get different results and realize which difference in state of a specific unit is meaningful. So that's the state grain. I hope.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. So the time has come. So let's end this journal club. Thank you both and everyone. And one thing clarify, you don't for attendee, you don't have to finish reading or whole the papers. So now wanted you to read very casually within 2 hours, even you are presenters. So please feel very casual and attend to many journal clubs and feel relaxed and fun. And thank you, everyone. And I will finish